gentlemen, if you can please be seated, we'll be starting momentarily. Again, good evening. My name is Wes Nails. I'm the President and CEO of the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce, Germanna Community College, and the town of County of Culpeper, Virginia, I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance this evening to the Virginia 7th Congressional District Debate. I would personally also like to thank Germanna and both campaigns for helping organize this event tonight. As you can see, we have a full house. It's a very high-demand event to attend. So for those of you who are here, consider yourselves some of the lucky ones. In a moment, I'll be bringing out the candidates and our moderator for evenings, but I just want to cover a few rules of decorum. First off, if necessary, to my left in the hallway and down the hallway to the left, there are restrooms. If you must leave your seat, please be respectful of others of you in attendance tonight, as they obviously are here to enjoy the event as well. Also, we ask all cell phones be silenced. Photography and recording is allowed, but again, please be respectful and courteous for others in the event, in this event tonight. We sent out an email earlier. During this evening, we ask that all applause, all cheering be reserved until the end of the debate. Obviously, we encourage you to welcome our candidates to the stage, but after that, please again hold until the end. Any jeering, booing, heckling, or anything of that nature will result in being asked to leave the premises. And then finally, again, we are here to have a good event. Please be respectful of one another. So at this moment, I'd like to ask our candidates to please enter the room and come to the stage. And tonight's moderator for the evening is a long-time Virginia resident, graduating from Culpeper County High School and from George Mason University, majoring in communications with a specialization in mass media. He was hired by Culpeper Media Network in 2004, which eventually led to him being promoted to station manager. Currently, when he is not at the station working, he is raising his growing family and also supporting the ever-growing Culpeper community. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please help me welcome your moderator for the evening, Jonathan Krawchuk.
Well, apparently I don't need a standing ovation, that's okay. Let's see how it is. Let me just check the time real quick. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started here in just a moment. First off, I want to remind you of how the debate format is going to go. Each candidate will be given an opening statement of 3 minutes. And judging from our coin toss, Ms. Spanberger was the winner, and she has decided to go last with her closing statement, which means that Congressman Dave Brat, you will be answering our first question. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to respond to the question, and if you so choose, you can ask for a 1-minute rebuttal with one of the red cards provided to you this evening. Keep in mind that you only have 3 of these cards, and they will be used for the duration of the evening. Again, a 3-minute closing statement, and as mentioned earlier, there is a disruption penalty for this evening. We want to make sure that each candidate has their allotted time to respond. If there is any disruption, including applause from the audience, the timer will stop and you will be given additional time. I will be keeping time, and we'll make sure that we have a wonderful debate, and again, I want to thank you all for coming. As we get ready to go tonight, we want to welcome everyone to the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce's 7th District Congressional Debate here at Germanna Community College's Daniel Center in Culpeper, Virginia. We want to welcome viewers to tonight's debate, which is being simulcast on Richmond's WTVR CBS 6, C-SPAN, and Culpeper Media Network, as well as online at culpepermedia.org and WTVR.com. Again, my name is Jonathan Krawchuk, Station Manager at Culpeper Media Network and moderator for this evening. Let's get started by meeting our candidates. Ms. Abigail Spanberger. Abigail began her career in public service as a federal law enforcement officer working narcotics and money laundering cases with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Abigail then joined the CIA as an operations officer, where she traveled and lived abroad collecting intelligence, managing assets, and overseeing high-profile programs in service to the United States. In 2014, Abigail left the CIA and moved back to her hometown in Virginia to work in the private sector. Abigail and her husband Adam live in Glen Ellen with their 3 children who attend Henrico County Schools. And Congressman Dr. Dave Brat was a full professor and chairman of the Economics and Business Department at Randolph-Macon College for nearly 2 decades. Before joining Congress, Dave graduated from Princeton Seminary with a Master's in Divinity and received his BA in Business and PhD in Economics from the American University. He worked at Arthur Andersen Consulting, the State Department, the Army, and the World Bank. Dave and his wife Laura have 2 children. His daughter Sophia is a junior in public high school in Henrico County, and his son Jonathan is a 3rd-year student at the University of Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, your candidates for this evening. All right, again, we want to thank you for coming, and we're going to start with our first question. And again, Mrs. Spanberger, you chosen to go your last statement. So first question will go to you, Congressman Dave Brat. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah. Congressman Dave Brat, please, your opening statement.
Great. Thank you very much to the Chamber and to Germanna for having us here. I ran for Congress 4 years ago. I was an economics professor, and we had a very weak economy. I felt it was unethical to send my students out in such a weak labor market, and so I ran for Congress. I ran as an outsider. I ran as a long shot candidate. And the day after my first big win, we achieved national results. I ran against my own leadership on immigration. And the day after my victory, a huge liberal amnesty bill was making its way through Congress. And that bill came crashing to an end the day of my election. So since day one, we've achieved results for the American people. And that bill would have been devastating for the average American worker, for Virginia wages, and for Virginia jobs. And so that huge win opened the door, and now millions and millions of dollars are flooding from the left and Nancy Pelosi and outside special interest groups into this district to buy this election back. And I want to let everybody know tonight that this election is huge money, and a vote for my opponent will be a vote for the Nancy Pelosi liberal agenda. There are millions and millions of reasons why she will favor that agenda. And so, as opposed to that agenda of resist and the liberal policies of Nancy Pelosi, I ran on results, and I'd like to share a few of those with you. I ran on tax cuts. The tax cuts passed, and this economy is just booming. The economy is growing at 4%. The average Virginia family has $2,500 in your pocket. That is a new refrigerator. That is a family vacation. That is a car fix. Families have many uses for $2,500. My opponent wants to take that $2,500 from Virginia families and return it back up to Washington, D.C. The tax cuts and the economy are going so fast and so good, we have money now to shore up Medicare, Social Security, and pay for pre-existing conditions. The unemployment rate for African Americans and women are at their all-time historic lows ever. Small businesses across the district are flourishing. It's no time to turn back to the failed Obama era and economy. It's time to move forward with progress and results. On immigration, I've been a leader and I have proven results. My opponent is for open borders, sanctuary cities, and has even made remarks supporting some of the gangs in public remarks. Those gangs have brought in the drugs to our country, opioids, etc. And instead of deporting these folks and putting them in jail, my opponent wants to provide a sanctuary. On health care, she's in favor of Obamacare, prices up 150% and $5,000 deductibles. And she and Nancy Pelosi want to go beyond that and double down for a $32 trillion socialized takeover, government takeover of national health care. So I please ask you to vote tonight to continue the progress we've been making, to continue the positive results, and vote for results, not resistance.
Thank you, Congressman Dave Brat. I would remind the audience that we will save our applause to the end of this evening. Thank you for doing so. Ms. Spanberger, you have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here to Germanna Community College and Culpeper Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for hosting. Jonathan, thank you for being a moderator. To the Sheriff's Department and Germanna Community College Police, thank you for being security. To my opponent, thank you for participating. To our teams who put this together, thank you so much. And to everyone who spending their evening here with us tonight, thank you for being a part of this event. My name is Abigail Spanberger, and I am the Democratic nominee running for Congress here in Virginia's 7th District. And I look forward to answering your questions, but right now I'd like to tell you about the 3 most influential people in my life. The first is my father. My father taught me the value of service from the time he joined the Army to the time he retired as a career federal agent. My father taught me the lesson that there is nothing more important than service to this country. And that is why I embarked on a career of service, first as a federal agent, working narcotics cases and money laundering, oftentimes with ICE in partnership. And before I pivoted on to CIA, where I worked as counterterrorism, I worked counter-narcotics, and I worked counter-proliferation. My time in CIA was meant to inform our policymakers, our president, our military, and our diplomats, and it was hard work. But I learned the value of hard work from my mother. You see, my mother had a difficult childhood. She spent time in foster care, and from her I learned hard work, grit, and a fierce determination that anything worth doing is hard work. And with determination and focus, anything is achievable. And that was a lesson that was necessary at CIA, because so often we were facing insurmountable, incredible challenges. How is it that we could collect the information that people needed going into a negotiation? How is it that we could collect the valuable information that would drive national security policy? But none of it was too hard, because right now, even as people are angry and people are afraid, and some people want you to be angry, and some people want you to be afraid, I refuse to do it because I am an eternal optimist. And this is the lesson that I learned from my grandfather, because my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, returned home, met the love of his life, had 4 children, and was a widower in his early 30s. My grandfather, who worked in a paint factory, my grandfather, who in his own retirement couldn't afford to retire, so he drove the activity bus at a retirement community, taught me every day that optimism and belief that tomorrow can be better is the lesson that we as Americans should hold dear. And that is why I'm running for Congress, because we need people in Washington who are committed to this country, who are committed to the notion of service, who believe that anything is possible through hard work, and who have an optimistic belief in who it is that we are as a people. Someone in Congress who is willing to work for this country and put country over any party, country over any person, and country over any special interest.
Thank you, Congressman Dave Brat and Ms. Spanberger. I appreciate your opening statements. We will now go to our first question. Our first question in the state national category, and Congressman Brat, you will have the first question, is dealing with healthcare. Do you believe that large pharmaceutical companies should be held accountable to control or reduce the increasing cost of life-saving medicines, such as insulin, EpiPen, HIV treatment, etc.? If so, how?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, we've achieved results on health care. The health care bill the Republicans put forward actually lowered the price of health care. And pharmaceuticals is coming next. And the basic principle of pharmaceuticals in order to lower costs is the same principle across the economy. And that's we need more competition, not less. So the last thing we need to do with pharmaceuticals is move toward an Obamacare model where a total government takeover of health care, as my opponent and Nancy Pelosi want to follow. If you vote for my opponent tonight, you will get the liberal Nancy Pelosi agenda across the board. You will get large companies running our economy instead of small people and small firms competing. James Madison said, for our government, we want a large number of small competitors. Adam Smith, for a free market economy to thrive, we need a large number of small firms competing against each other. That is not what we have in DC. My opponent has floods of special interest money, millions and millions of dollars coming in. The last thing we want to do is have the government running pharmaceuticals. The best thing to produce competition and to produce patents, which make sense and will eventually lead to generics and low prices, is a lot of firms competing against each other to produce low-cost outcomes. And so the contrast between me and my opponent could not be clearer tonight. My opponent, for example, on the tax cuts, wants to return the money from the tax cuts back up to the federal government. My philosophy is to take the government and the federal dollars and bring them back down to the state at every opportunity and back down to our local officials who know how to deal with them better. And when it comes to drugs, the opioid crisis is exactly this problem. We pass a ton of great bills up to the federal level, but the problem is the money is trapped at our community service boards at the state level, and it's not making its way down to our local sheriffs in Chesterfield and Rico and all 10 of our counties. And those drugs are vitally needed, and we need low-cost drugs. And so the basic idea is to return power back to states and localities.
Thank you, Congressman Brat. Sorry, I want to remind our audience that we do have a interruption penalty of 7 seconds for Mr. Brat. Dave, sorry. And Mrs. Spanberger, Abigail, if you would you like a question here?
No, thank you.
Okay.
When I have traveled across this district, the number one issue that people are talking about, the rising cost of prescription drug medicine and the cost of healthcare across the board, is the number one thing that people are talking about. And how it is that we can actually address the prescription drug price issue is we need more competition in the marketplace. Currently, it is possible for pharmaceutical companies to do what's called patent thicketing, where they elongate the patents and they depress competition. Medicare, for example, needs to be able to negotiate its prescription drug prices. The Veterans Administration is able to do so, and some drugs are up to 80% cheaper on the Veterans Administration side than they are on the Medicare side. In terms of what we need to do overall with healthcare, and I think we'll probably be talking about this quite a lot, we need to strengthen our current healthcare system, and we need a public option. You will hear my opponent speak very frequently of some expensive program that I do in fact not support. I support a public option. But while we're talking about the costs and special interest money, I would note that in our tax bill, the 2017 tax bill that added to the deficit to the tune of $1.9 trillion, pharmaceutical companies, the top 5 pharmaceutical companies, got $42 billion in tax cuts. And so when we are looking at the reason we cannot lower the price of prescription drugs, and Medicare cannot negotiate its prescription drug prices, it is because the pharmaceutical lobby is so great. It is so great that when we have a congressman like Congressman Brat, who said he would not add to the deficit, who votes against spending bills because they would add to the deficit, is willing to add $1.9 trillion to the deficit in order to give tax cuts to the tune of $42 billion to pharmaceutical companies.
Thank you, Ms. Spanberger. All right, Abigail, we'll turn to you for our next question, which has to deal with immigration. What impact, if any, has the current administration's immigration policy had on Virginia's workforce?
We as a country need comprehensive immigration reform. It is something that has been talked about for years. We have not achieved bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform. And right here in Culpeper, I have heard stories from people in the agricultural business who are concerned about whether long-term they will have the employees that they need. People throughout our district are concerned about the way immigration has become such a politically divisive issue. The truth of the matter is we need immigration reform, comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform that achieves a number of things. First, that secures our borders and our points of entry. I worked at CIA as a former CIA officer. I worked undercover, I worked counterterrorism, I worked narco-trafficking, understanding the drug cartels working throughout Mexico. I am well aware of the threats that present themselves at the southern border, and it's for that reason that we need comprehensive immigration reform that is strong on border security and strengthening our points of entry. But we also need immigration reform that will meet the needs of the employers here throughout the 7th District, here throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we need comprehensive immigration reform that gives certainty to dreamers, children who were brought here through no fault of their own by their parents. And that's what bipartisanship should look like. This is a pressing issue that is impacting communities and economies across Central Virginia and across this country. And we need bipartisanship to actually drive change on this issue. But when we look at what my opponent has been advocating for, it is not a bipartisan solution. The bill, the compromise bill that he so frequently talks about, it was a compromise between the far right and the more moderate Democrat, or the more moderate Republicans. There was a compromise bill. There was a bipartisan bill that was put forth in Congress, but it didn't get out of committee this time around. But it was put forth by a Republican and a Democrat. There are people who are willing, who are working to try and find bipartisan solutions, but there are currently not enough of them in Congress.
Thank you, Abigail. Dave?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it had to do, can you repeat the question of labor force?
Sure. What impact, if any, has the current administration's immigration policy had on Virginia's workforce?
Yeah, well, and as I said, we achieved a huge result by, first of all, avoiding a huge amnesty bill, which would have had a devastating impact on wages for the nation. As the labor supply goes up with a huge amnesty, American wages go down. American jobs go down. And so our efforts on that front have been very positive. And so my opponent just brought up comprehensive immigration reform. We have the Goodlatte bill this year, and she says that's not bipartisan. Obama was for that. The Clintons were for E-Verify and the major components in that bill. Everyone until the last couple of years, the left has gone off the rails. And so every major Democrat, including Barbara Jordan, the great civil rights leader, was in favor of all the components in that Goodlatte bill. It is bipartisan. We compromised. We took care of 700,000 DACA kids, gave them a legal status. That's a compromise. No Democrat would vote for it. Then President Trump upped it and did 1.8 million DACA kids. The Democrats said no to that compromise. Then I did a bill that united parents and kids at the border with Senator Ted Cruz. And Chuck Schumer, the Democrats, said no to that bill. So if you look at the facts of the matter and the actual legislation that came up and the votes, it's very clear that my opponent falls to the very far left on this issue of immigration. She has been on the record in favor of sanctuary cities. She said the states and localities can deal with these issues. We don't need to cooperate with the federal government. That's what sanctuary cities are. You don't cooperate with the law of the land. We have plenty of great laws on the books if we would only follow the law. And so it's just a matter of simple law enforcement. And of course we need our federal ICE agents working with us at the state and local. Her objection there is very radical if you think about it. She's saying don't follow the law of the land. We should not cooperate with federal law enforcement. And that's stunning. The ICE agents are the ones who are protecting us from the 300 million lethal doses of fentanyl that came across the border last year. The heroin, the opioids, the human trafficking. These are real, and talk to the sheriffs up here in Culpeper. Talk to the sheriffs in Henrico and down in Chesterfield. If you don't think it's a serious problem, we have 150 beds in Henrico alone for this. And so, oh, sorry, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, Abigail has chosen to use one of her red cards. You have 1 minute to rebut.
Thank you so much. Congressman Brat, I appreciate you explaining to me the role of federal law enforcement agents, because indeed I used to be one. I used to work jointly with ICE. I worked joint drug cases, in fact, in the DC area with the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force, also known as HIDTA. I am well aware of the role of federal agents. I do not support safe havens for criminals or gangs. I do not support anything that would make our communities weak or hurt our communities. In fact, I used to work every single day to keep the community I lived in safe, to keep our communities free of drugs on the street. So for you to allege anything else is frankly comical, but in fact, I would like to state for the record that I support law enforcement in all its form because I used to be among them and I am the daughter of a career law enforcement officer.
Thank you, Abigail. I appreciate that. Again, a reminder, you have 3 rebuts throughout the evening. We'll move to our next question. This one's for you, Dave. We turn to trade and foreign policy. With the recent signing of the new United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement, the USMCA, that replaced NAFTA, what effect will this have on Virginia's manufacturers and agribusiness?
Yep, thanks for the question. I've always been a free trader. I did my PhD in economics on free trade, and so the goal of the White House when it comes to these new trade agreements is to move toward zero tariffs. Unfortunately, the rest of the world does not agree with that thesis, especially China. And so when it comes to the NAFTA agreement, we just did basically bilateral agreements with Canada and Mexico, and we firmed up both trade agreements with Canada and with Mexico. We made improvements in that trade deal. Europe has also came to the table, and we made improvements with Europe in 1 year under this administration. China is the big threat. It's rising to a $20 trillion economy. And so in the short run, we are working on trade agreements with them because they have been stealing our intellectual property and cheating on every trade agreement we've had. And the American people know better. We paid after World War II for the entire Bretton Woods liberal order. We paid for the Marshall Plan, we paid for the World Bank, the IMF, and we paid for the entire liberal order that has brought us all together for a win-win. We made friends with our arch enemies, the Germans and the Japanese. And now we all are friends and play win-win together on trade and economic growth. And it's been great for our country. And so that is the result that we've achieved with this executive in our Congress this year. The economy is now booming. We still have work to go with China. But when it comes to our agriculture, it's the largest sector in Virginia. And so we work very hard with our farm bureaus across all my 10 counties to protect them and to ensure that any tariff negotiations are short-lived and are a matter of months, not years. But we have to do that. It's basically more a matter of geopolitics and not a matter of trade policy. On trade, we all want zero tariffs. The White House has said that is the goal for the long run.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Abigail, same question.
Thank you. So the updated trade deal is an updated version of NAFTA, which has some positive benefits, particularly for dairies, which is impactful here in Culpeper and across our communities in the 7th District. The notion that we would move towards zero tariffs by starting a trade war is not something that I understand. And in fact, we have antagonized our allies and our trade partners by creating and starting a trade war. When we look at the fact that, as Congressman Brat just said, China is a big threat. If China is such a big threat, why are we comfortable with the fact that they hold the most amount of our debt? A debt that we have now just chosen, thanks to the tax bill of 2017, to increase by $1.9 trillion. And these tariffs and the changes that they've made haven't been great. And if you don't believe me, ask the 20,000 Ford workers who just lost their jobs because Ford said they couldn't handle the steel and aluminum tariffs that depleted their income by $1 billion. And then we can talk about the soybean farmers right here across the 7th District. Soybean farmers right here who, because of these tariffs, have decreased prices per bushel. It costs about $10.05 per bushel for a soybean farmer to break even. Prices since the tariffs went into place haven't been above $9. We are creating challenges in our community, and to answer them, the president's desire, the president's choice was in fact to put a $12 billion bailout on the American taxpayers' back. A $12 billion bailout. Farmers don't want bailouts, they want to sell their crops. And so the notion that we would start a trade war to get ourselves to the point where we are back at zero tariffs doesn't make any sense to me. It is reckless foreign policy. It creates detrimental relationships with our friends, our allies, and our trading partners. And long term, it is tremendously detrimental to our stability in the world.
Thank you, Abigail. All right, Dave, thank you very much. We're going to move to our next question. Wait, I'm sorry, I apologize. This question is for you. Second Amendment to public safety. There continues to be a growing public concern regarding gun violence and school safety. What measures would you put in place to provide a safe environment for students?
So as I mentioned, I am a former law enforcement officer. I used to carry a gun every single day. I am well aware of the responsibility of gun ownership. I grew up in a house with guns. I grew up in a family of sportsmen. But we can have conversations in our community about how it is that we can balance our Second Amendment right, which I firmly support, with the rights of our school children to go to school and feel safe. In our county, in Henrico County, I say our because the congressman lives there as well, one of our schools had a threat of gun violence. The day that I put my children on the bus, when there was a threat of gun violence in our county, was a hard day. No parent should feel that way. No child should feel concerned that they might die in their classroom. 3 out of 4 dues-paying NRA members believe that background checks should be in place. Background checks on all firearms purchases. This is simply applying the same standard that exists if you go to a federally licensed place, point of sale like Bella's, as if you buy at a gun show. That is a first step forward that we can take. The other thing that we should be doing when looking at gun violence is ensuring that our schools have the resources to deal with students who might be facing trauma or who might be facing stress, who might be at risk for violent behavior. This is a comprehensive issue. It is not one that we can solve in a day, but it is certainly not one that we will be able to solve if we do not have leaders in Washington who are willing to have those hard conversations. But the good news is there are already members of Congress who are willing to have that conversation. There is a bipartisan background checks bill in Congress. It couldn't get out of committee because there was not a critical mass of people willing to have hard conversations. And so I want to go to Congress to be a part of these discussions. Again, I understand gun ownership. I understand the responsibility of gun ownership. And these are conversations we can have about ensuring that people who are a risk to themselves, their community, or others are not able to do harm in our schools.
Thank you, Abigail. Dave?
Yes, thank you very much. This is a tough conversation to have, and we've had plenty of them in the 7th District. I have a daughter in the audience that goes to public school as well, and of course we all work hard every day on this issue to keep our kids very safe. So I convened a major group of all the folks across all 10 counties, school resource officers, school counselors, mental health experts, sheriffs, police, first responders. Everyone was in a room with school counselors so that we had all voices in, and they came up with 3 solutions that I'll share with you tonight. First, and this was after the Parkland, Florida incident, and a lot of this is in response to the failure in Parkland, and we don't want to repeat that in our counties here. And so the first was to harden the schools with school resource officers. The second was to enhance significantly mental health. Everyone was in agreement that that was probably the major piece we need to work on. And that's connected to the third piece, which is to connect the dots between the federal government, the state government, the FBI, the localities and law enforcement, and then the schools themselves. And that was a total tragedy in the Parkland, Florida case. They connected no dots. The FBI did not talk to the states. The states didn't talk to the localities. The local police force visited that young boy's home 20 times, and no dots were connected. The school resource officer was not in the school. In our districts and across our counties, we have outstanding law enforcement. You see them with us today. The FBI is in constant communication with our state leaders, and I'm very proud of the work our law enforcement does on these issues. And so those are the primary solutions that I receive by listening to my constituents. Those are the experts in our community, and that's what they came up with. When it comes to guns, if you want to follow the Nancy Pelosi liberal agenda, and if you look at blue states, can I finish the question? I have a few more seconds. If you want to look at the liberal Nancy Pelosi agenda, and my opponent would be a vote for that entire agenda, all you have to do is look at the blue states and blue counties. They say, let's just work on this issue and this issue and this issue and have conversations about it. But up in those blue states, they want to take away your guns. And they have taken away guns, and crime has not gone down at all in San Francisco or Chicago or New York.
Congressman, thank you. Again, there was a penalty of 9 seconds on that answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question goes to you as well, sir. Dealing with education and workforce readiness. According to the Federal Reserve, national student debt reached $1.5 trillion in the first quarter of 2018. Because of this, and the challenge recent college graduates are facing in finding full-time employment or employment of adequate pay, high school students are hesitant or skeptical in enrolling in traditional 2- or 4-year colleges. What plans do you have to either provide assurance to future collegiates or expand higher education funding to college alternatives, such as CTE and trade schools?
Right, thank you very much for the question. As you know, I was a professor for 20 years at Randolph-Macon College, and I work with students every day on career planning, and got to work with community colleges with Senator Stosh and on CTE for years. Our districts are blessed with great career technical programs already and excellent programs in the trades, but we have huge moves we can still make, and Germanna is part of that solution. And so last year, our results, we improved the K-12 education bill by taking away federal mandates. And so now our states and localities are not under all of the federal burdens for high-stakes testing constantly. And they have the latitude to add these courses and internships and on-the-job training and career and technical education. And that's step one. And then step two, this year I'm on the education committee, and we also provided results in higher ed by doing a CTE bill. that enhance and broadens all sorts of opportunities for kids to follow new and improved paths. A four-year college is not for everyone, and we have to break that stigma for our kids. There is nothing wrong, and there are great opportunities right now. Our truckers, the starting pay in my district is $65,000 for truckers. We have welders, electricians, tradesmen. Every small business I go to meet with has a skilled worker shortage. Kids need to learn the soft skills. They need to learn this in K-12. Our Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox, wrote an excellent piece in the paper just today on this exact set of issues, and we need to cooperate with businesses to make this happen. And so we've done the right things on the education front, but the real opportunities comes with economic growth. You don't have job opportunities if the economy's not growing. And if we go backwards to the failed Pelosi policies of the Democrats, under Obama, you have no growth and no job openings in the first place. So you can do all the right things in education, but if you don't have any jobs, that's when student debt goes through the roof. They cannot pay off their debt because there's no jobs to help them pay off their debt.
Thank you, sir. Abigail?
Yes, before continuing with this question, I'd like to just address a couple things related to the gun violence. One, there was an armed officer at Parkland. He did not make entry on the building. He did not attempt to stop the shooter, which I do not blame him for, but when we talk about hardening our schools, it's necessary to reflect that that in fact was the case. In terms of connecting the dots, there were multiple people who were aware that the shooter was a threat. The problem is that there was no jurisdictional availability for anyone to take action because being a threat and being concerning in one's action is in fact not a crime. So if Congressman Brat, if you are interested in making progress on this, I hope you will support the Gun Violence Restraining Order Act that was introduced to Congress by Congressman Don Beyer that would put in place and incentivize red flag laws that would actually allow action when law enforcement is made aware of threats. Moving on to the question related to education. Students graduating from college have more debt. There is more student loan debt in this country than there is credit card debt. On my team alone, we have members of our team who have so much tremendous debt. Adults with children and families and mortgages. It is hard to get out from underneath student debt. Among the things that I would support in Congress to address this issue, I would support allowing students with student loan debt to be able to refinance their loans just as one can with credit cards so that they can get the most competitive rate being given to students now. I would also support a bill that's before Congress that's a bipartisan initiative that would incentivize employers through tax programs to pay off student loans for some of their students. Also recognizing that college and four-year degrees is not for anyone, or for everyone, excuse me. I would support strong CTE programs and ensuring that we are recognizing the value of apprenticeship programs, be they private sector, public partner partnerships, or union-based, and that we are ensuring that certifications are transferable and people understand them. I appreciate what my opponent said, but the truth of the matter is when it came time to vote on additional funding for apprenticeship programs, for CTE efforts, he did not vote because he didn't want to add to the deficit.
Thank you, Abigail. Our next set of questions has to deal with more local issues, but with, of course, national impact. Turn to healthcare. Abigail, this one is for you. Whether it be providers or emergency services, many rural residents still struggle to have access to quality healthcare. What solutions do you propose to alleviate these challenges?
I have visited health clinics across this district, the Orange Free Clinic, Health Parade that serves many 7th District residents. My mother used to volunteer her time as a nurse at Crossover Clinics that serves throughout residents of Chesterfield and Henrico. The fact that we have so many individuals in our community who rely on free clinics because healthcare is so expensive is a tremendous issue. And it goes back to the point that healthcare is the #1 issue people are talking about across our district. And what we really need is more competition. We need people with greater access to healthcare, greater access to affordable healthcare, and that comes when we give people more options. And so that is why I support strengthening our current healthcare system, making sure that people with pre-existing conditions are protected, making sure that there are no lifetime caps, making sure that people can stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26, but also adding competition through a public option. CBO scored a public option back in 2013 and said it would have $158 billion in savings for the federal government. So you might hear my opponent say that I support some expensive plan by Bernie Sanders. That is in fact not the case. I've been saying that since January. But what I do support is greater competition, because when we look at what exists here locally, we have insurers that are leaving our areas, leaving our residents, particularly in the rural areas, without options. And that's why I support a public option. The public option I support, it's called the Medicare Ex-Choice Act. It's built off the framework, separately from Medicare, but off the framework of Medicare. And so, as the plan is proposed, it would go into place in the rural areas first, allowing a multi-year rollout for iterative change as the plan from theory goes into practice and might need changes. But it would have immediate positive impact on our communities, particularly in the rural areas.
Thank you, Abigail. Dave?
Yes, thank you very much. As I noted in the opening, I fought very hard against my own leadership team on our health care bill for months to get the price to come down significantly in our health care bill while providing for pre-existing conditions. And so our bill passed through the House with pre-existing conditions and with lower prices. Contrast that with what my opponent is saying today. And again, I will reiterate, a vote for my opponent will be a vote for every single Nancy Pelosi agenda item, on and on and on. So what she didn't mention is the failure of Obamacare. She keeps talking about that, and she promises, well, we did Obamacare, and we're going to do a huge government add-on to Obamacare. We've already doubled down on government, and somehow prices are going to go down. What she won't tell you is that under Obamacare, which she favored in the past, prices went up 150% in the last 5 years. Those are the stone-cold facts. We don't live in utopia where you just get to promise that prices are going to come down. Under her experiment called Obamacare, it, along with her ads, which are running today, she got 4 Pinocchios for the lies on my votes on pre-existing conditions. And as well as Obamacare got the lie of the year by PolitiFact when it came out. What was the lie in Obamacare? You can keep your insurance coverage. You can keep your doctor, and the price would go down. No. And so she says, well, you get insurance. Everyone will have health insurance. But if you have health insurance with a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible, and the average savings for people in the country is $400, I fail to see how you're providing cost-effective care, which we all want. Prices went up 150% under Obamacare. The way to lower prices is to get rid of Obamacare and to go back to markets. You don't do competition by doubling down and doing a full government takeover of health care. You do competition with business. And I'll note on her answer to education, she mentioned everything except the economy and business and providing jobs for the kids after we invest in education. The reason we're doing that is to get them jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Spanberger, you've chosen to use another rebuttal card. You have an additional minute.
My opponent has really made my point for me. He said if you can't get cost-effective health care, you may as well not have it. That's exactly the point with pre-existing conditions. I don't care that pre-existing conditions were in the bill. I care that pre-existing conditions weren't protected in the bill. The AHCA would have allowed insurers to jack up prices for people with pre-existing conditions. And Congressman, I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, but in fact, Washington Post put out a 4 Pinocchios on your press release because in fact the ad you referenced was not our ad. It was in fact one run against Congressman Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania by yet another Democrat. I would also remind you, you are running against me, not a Democrat in Pennsylvania, and certainly not Nancy Pelosi.
I would remind the audience that we will save applause for any cheering or jeering towards the end. We appreciate it. You have chosen to use an additional rebuttal of 1 minute.
Yep.
And you have
my opponent's just wrong on the facts when it comes to pre-existing conditions. Not only did we vote for it and it's in the bill, my opponent says it will jack up the price of health care. Will it jack up the price of health care 150% like Obamacare did? No, it will not. And so this is a matter of apples and oranges. She's in favor of government-run health care, and to be absolutely clear on the record, she has said she is in principle for a total government takeover, Medicare for all, ending Medicare as you know it, and threatening Medicare. Those are her comments on the record in the quotes. Now that the Richmond Times-Dispatch printed the article about $32 trillion for that program, and doubling your individual tax rates for everyone in this room, and doubling the corporate rate, all of a sudden she switches back to Obamacare X. And so it depends who she's talking to, But make no mistake, a vote for Abigail Spanberger will be a vote for the Nancy Pelosi agenda.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Again, I would remind if the audience wants to make their voice be heard, they do so in the polls on November 6th. Our next question, Dave, we're going to start with you. It has to do with, again, immigration. Earlier this year, Governor Northam vetoed a proposed bill that would prohibit the establishment of sanctuary cities in Virginia. What impact do you foresee this having on our district, both economically and socially?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As I've said throughout this debate, I've provided results when it comes to immigration. I've stopped huge amnesty bills. We've worked to push back on open borders, sanctuary cities that always comes from the Nancy Pelosi agenda. And that's what you see on the Democrat side. Look at San Francisco, the home of Nancy Pelosi. Do you want to turn Richmond into San Francisco? And the answer appears to be yes from our governor. And my opponent is also on the record with very clear comments, and she went off on law enforcement, and that's good, and I'm happy with her service to our country in law enforcement. But when it comes to immigration, that doesn't change her position. She said she does not want federal law enforcement working with state and locals, and I'll give it to the press today. Her remarks are out in public view for all to see. And so that is the issue. Governor Northam, along with Nancy Pelosi, wants to provide sanctuary. And what does that mean? It's sanctuary from violent crime and illegal immigrants. That's what it's sanctuary from. Those folks should be deported, not giving sanctuary in our neighborhoods across Virginia and across the Commonwealth. And so immigration is one of the huge issues. Again, I'll repeat, my opponent said we should have bipartisan agreement on this issue. We did. The Republicans compromised and put in a bill with 700,000 DACA relief, and then President Trump added it to 1.8 million. And then I put a bill in to unite parents and kids at the border. And the Democrats said no to every rational compromise. Why they say this as a political issue, I don't know. The compromise is sitting right there in front of them. So what part of the Goodlatte bill does my opponent not like? And you will not hear an answer. There is no policy platform on immigration coming from my opponent at all. So I can't tell what her position is.
Thank you, Dave. Abigail?
Sure. Republicans compromising is not bipartisanship. That's Republicans who are so far askew on this issue that when they come together and compromise, it is merely just a compromise among Republicans. Related to safe havens for criminals, I do not support safe havens for criminals or gangs. And I think that what's important here is the fact that this is actually a complicated issue when we look about how it is that we give responsibility and jurisdictional issues from one agency to another agency. And so me, in recognizing that there are constitutional issues at play and there are jurisdictional issues at play, is merely me understanding the complicated nature of this issue. But the bottom line is I do not support safe havens for criminals or gangs. And in fact, in terms of what it is that I do support related to immigration reform, I supported, were I in Congress, I would have been a major supporter of the Hurd-Aguilar bill. That is a bipartisan bill, meaning a Republican and a Democrat crossed the aisle, had hard conversations about what it is that they could agree on. Of note, I would add that Congressman Hurd, a Republican from Texas, is also a former CIA case officer. And so I've heard him give multiple talks about the bill that they put forward, that they proposed. And it is founded in a strong sense of how it is that we secure our borders. Because like myself, Congressman Hurd is well aware of the threats that are coming to this country at all fronts, but particularly along the southern border.
Thank you, Madam Gill. Our next question is for you when we turn to education. The United States is facing a teacher shortage, with District 7 currently having a number of full-time educator positions unfilled. What do you feel is causing this shortage, and how can we not only attract new teachers, but also encourage existing teachers to stay?
Across the 7th District, from Culpeper to Henrico to Chesterfield to Nottoway County, people are talking about the need for strong public schools. And I support keeping our public dollars in our public schools. I support ensuring that our public schools create a pathway towards success for our students, a pathway towards good paying jobs where students can grow up to be adults who add to our economy, who add to our community, and who add to our tax base. But when we look at the fact that we do have teacher shortages, we have to recognize that these teacher shortages are caused by the fact that indeed teacher pay hasn't gone up. Our communities are creating challenges for teachers, particularly as as housing prices go up. There has been housing prices in Henrico County have increased 28% over what incomes have increased. So when we look at the challenges that are presenting people who are increasingly having difficulty affording houses in the places where they live, that is compounding the issue of why we have teacher shortages. Since 2000, I believe the statistic is teacher salaries have gone down 1.2%, and that is when we adjust for inflation. So the real issue here is that we are making it difficult for people who want to choose a career in education to do so. And when we look at the fact that so many teachers are graduating with significant debt, it goes back to an earlier question of how it is that we can incentivize people to pursue careers in public education, and still be able to afford their house, still be able to pay back their loans. And that's something that we can do by allowing for people with student loan debt to refinance their debt, by expanding access to Pell Grants across our communities, and by ensuring that employers, including public schools, have the ability and tax incentives in place to be able to pay back some of the student loan debt that their teachers and employees may carry with them.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes, thank you. I'm very proud of the Republican results. I work on the Education Committee, and as I said, we have proven results this year. At the K-12 level, one of the major problems we have shared across school bureaucracies, teachers, and students is the nature of high-stakes testing. Our kids are under extreme pressure. They have to study all day and all night, every single test. We've lightened the load. We took away some of those federal mandates, and now the schools have the latitude to let teachers teach. Teachers don't like the high-stakes testing either. I worked with several curriculums in K-12 in my years working with the state senate. We had one collaboration with business partners. Business came into the schools and taught them to work at their corporation, the soft skills, the business skills. The teachers loved it. The administrators loved it. The kids loved it. The community loved it. The business partners loved it. This is what's wrong. We need creativity. The feds have done our job now. The problem is the one-size-fits-all education bureaucracy on the left, right? If you look at the big cities, it's always one-size-fits-all. The Fed knows best. Let's bring that money down to the states and localities. They know how best to fit their students in various counties that are urban or rural with various needs, with the job opportunities distinct there. And so the K-12 bill we passed has done heavy lifting, getting rid of the federal mandates. And then, in the higher ed level, we've done major heavy lifting to provide other venues for teachers to teach as well, including community colleges and CTE, etc. So if we make teaching more rewarding in the pay aspect as well as rewarding in the teaching aspect, that is the piece that has teachers leaving. They are not being allowed to teach. They're being asked to do every other job under the sun. The teachers are the salt of the earth, and we need to make their teaching environment more fun and more productive for the kids learning and for their eventual business outcomes.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Dave, you're going to continue with this next question. Has to deal with infrastructure. Accessibility to the internet is becoming more critical in everyday life. Residents in rural areas of our district have found it challenging to gain access at an affordable cost. If re-elected, is this a priority for you? And if so, what will you do to help these residents gain affordable internet access?
Yes, great. Thank you very much for that question. I've been working on rural broadband internet since day one in my job. The first year, I had town halls that were civil with rational discourse. I brought the head of the FCC down from DC to meet with all my county leaders, especially in the rural counties, and we held it up here. And that meeting got the ball rolling for collaboration with the federal government, the state government, and the local government. So much so we have a national model in Orange County with a county supervisor who I've known for a couple of decades. And he does wonderful work going off of a T1 line and providing a unique experiment in how to provide broadband. Louisa is making progress on this. I work with every rural community I can. I've gotten federal grants for the Orange Project. That grant, the federal government quit making payments on that. So last month we had to write letters to get them payments so they can keep building that broadband piece of work. And so I've been working on this issue since day one. We all know the stories where kids and parents have to drive to the McDonald's in order to get a signal. The internet is the pathway. It is the information pathway. Technology is basically the information in our minds, and we have to have access to that information for all of our kids. So to get economic development in the rurals, that is a huge priority, and I've been on it forever. I was surprised to hear my opponent go on the radio a couple of weeks ago on 11:40 a.m. and say I have done nothing on rural broadband without knowing any of the work that we've accomplished. So I'm very proud of our results, and it's hard to hear someone say something about no work at all when they don't even know about the work that's been done. And so I don't know what she knows about the work that has already been ongoing in all 10 of my counties. And thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dave. Abigail, same question.
Sure. What I know is that every opportunity to actually fund the programs that would provide grant money to our communities, you have voted against them, Congressman. That is what I know. When we are looking at the challenges facing our communities, again, from Culpeper to Louisa to Powhatan to Nottoway, it is an economic imperative that our communities have access to high-speed broadband internet. It is an educational imperative that our communities have access to high-speed broadband internet. We have kids in our community who are going to McDonald's to do their homework. In fact, I met a couple from Nottoway County that every Friday they drive their grandchildren to Chesterfield County libraries so that the kids can get on the internet. That should not be happening in Central Virginia. It is creating a divide in educational opportunity and educational experience. As we see telemedicine increasing across this country, it will also create a healthcare divide as communities are left behind without access to telemedicine. And we need to look at this problem just as the United States did in the 30s, when we recognized that in the event of electricity being left solely to the free market, there would be communities left behind. And there is an imperative that we recognize that broadband internet infrastructure is just as vital to the growth of our communities as electricity once was. I often tell the story that we moved home back to Henrico County to be close to family. Well, part of that story is that my husband is able to work from home. Had we been from parts of Amelia County, parts of Louisa County, we would not have been able to move home. We would not have been able to buy a house, put our kids in public school, invest in a community. The same way some graduating kids and some adults wanting to move back to Louisa County may not be able to do. This is an economic issue, a healthcare issue, and an educational issue, and one that I will work for in Congress.
Thank you, Abigail. This next question is also for you. It has to do with workforce and the economy. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as of August 2018, Virginia District 7 has an average unemployment rate of about 3% versus the national average of 3.9%. What do you attribute this to? And what workforce tax policies do you support that will assist in maintaining a low unemployment rate?
Central Virginia is a wonderful place to live. We have attracted businesses here. We have attracted employers here. We have attracted people to move back home and add to the economy. And we do see strong wages here. But when we look at the trajectory that we are on, real wages, are stagnating. And this is a challenge for people, as I mentioned earlier, as we continue to grow and as we become a place that more and more people want to move and more employers want to grow their businesses. Rents and housing prices are going up, and as wages remain stagnant and in some cases decrease, that will increase the challenges facing so many families. What we need to do is look at this as a comprehensive issue. We need to recognize that when people are paying a significant amount of their paycheck for their health insurance premiums, that puts a significant drain on their ability to pay other day-to-day costs. And while we have seen increases in paychecks, and Congressman Brat likes to give the quote of $2,500 per person because of the tax bill, that's actually if you are in a six-figure salary. And the average worker in the 7th district is not a six-figure salary earner. And when we are looking at the benefit of those additional dollars in people's pockets, we need to recognize, be it a refrigerator or a family vacation, there are businesses in this country who had billions of dollars in tax savings, and that did not go to employees as promised. $42 billion in tax savings for the pharmaceutical companies, and that did not go to the employees. When we look at what companies are spending their tax breaks on, 98% of the tax savings that they got are going to stock buybacks. That is not putting more dollars in people's pockets. So if we want to continue to grow our economy, we need comprehensive tax reform, but it needs to start with the middle class, because having a strong middle class is how we continue to grow our economy and our communities.
Thank you, Abigail. Dave?
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
I certainly can. Would you like the entire question?
Just a summary will do.
3% is the unemployment rate in Virginia, 3.9 is national. What do you attribute this to?
Yeah.
And what policies would you support that will assist in maintaining a low unemployment rate?
Great. I attribute it to good economic policy. For the last decade, and for 30 to 40 years, wages have been stagnant. My opponent is totally wrong on statistics. Wages are not stagnant right now. In August, wages are up 3% because this economy is booming right now. We did the tax cuts like JFK. Supply-side tax cuts should not be partisan. JFK did supply-side tax cuts and the economy took off and boom. And he said the best way to pay for government programs and add to the general revenue coffers is by doing business tax cuts. So this does not have to be partisan, but I want to clear the record. There is a huge difference between my pro-growth position and my opponent who called the tax cuts a gimmick. So she has to say the economy is floundering right now. And all the evidence, she's wrong on all the evidence she just ushered in. The economy is growing at 4.2% GDP growth. That's national income, right? And so wages are going up. There's a new report out this week. Blue-collar wages are going up faster than white-collar wages. And she said you should look at the 4.2 statistic. She said the tax cuts are a gimmick. She said the 4.2% is a skinny statistic. What I will say is it's consistent with 100 million Walmart shoppers having record retail sales. That's a kitchen table issue. And it's not true that the $2,500 bonuses are just to people that make six figures. Every Altria employee got a $3,000 bonus as a matter of fact. And many other corporations throughout our district got huge bonuses as well. So what we don't want to do is revert to the Nancy Pelosi liberal agenda. That is